Okay folks, so we're back for the 11 o'clock session, idea development. I hope the audio is a little bit better on this video. I do apologise, my video recording software, I had two mics currently selected, so that's why you got that sort of reverb echo sort of thing. Today we're looking at developing ideas and generating ideas, idea development obviously. Today we're looking at what makes album covers iconic. There's a whole load of iconic album covers here. We can see David Bowie, Blink-182, Nirvana, Pink Floyd, Van Halen, the Beatles, loads of them. So loads of things that you can see that create something that's iconic. Loads of people use this word iconic, but let's try and work out what they actually mean by iconic. Okay, so yeah, we know exactly where we are. We're on the album redesign. We're in the first week of album redesign, which is week 4. So yeah, this runs for 2 weeks again, same as we did with digital illustration. This is your album redesign session. Okay, as always, please be here, be on time, stay on track, and be professional. These are the 4 confetti rules. Please make note of them. Please keep them in your mind at all times, and yes, you may be tested on these at some point. We'll have a little look. Sorry, we've got a bit of dust on my keyboard. Okay, right. Yes, as always, please stay on task and stay for the entire session. Ask for help if needed via the chat function. I'll get onto it as soon as possible. Sign the register post at the top of your group window. If I'm talking, need 100% of your attention, please. Please keep all conversations relevant and keep them to replies of each slide. Don't start new conversations. Make the most of your time in sessions and back up all your work. Today we're going to be looking at maybe designing an album cover, designing a new album cover and creating sketches. This is to develop your understanding of what makes an album cover iconic, and to develop understanding of the mixture of text with imagery. You must design a new album cover. You should actively participate in classroom discussion. That's by sending anything that I ask for via text through to me in the chat function, and design an album cover. And you could actively participate in classroom discussion, design an album cover based on the emotions of the album. This is the feelings, everything that you get from this album. I'm going to be looking for album cover work. I don't know what album is. I presume I meant album. Sorry, it's a little bit of a typo there on my behalf. Okay, so what do we mean by iconic? I'll give you 7 minutes now. Please write down for me what we mean by iconic and send it to me via the chat function. Thank you. Smashing. Thank you very much, folks. These are the assessment criteria for idea development. As you'll notice, this is different assessment criteria to the design workshops assessment criteria, but you need to read these in order to know what you're going to be marked against. Okay, so we've been looking at prevent all this week. I'd like you to look for me, find out how can graphic design be used by far-right groups to get unity from its followers. You have 10 minutes. Please pause the video now and come back in 10 minutes time. Thank you. Okay, yeah, so what some of you probably got was something like this: right-wing signs and symbols aids. Prevent is something that is, we're not just talking about Islamic terrorism. Lots of people won't think when we talk about terrorism that we mean specifically Islamic terrorism. This is completely this is definitely not what we're actually talking about. And I think you'll find when you look at terrorism in the UK and the way that Prevent works, that the largest rising group is like right-wing, white power groups, and these are some of the iconography that they use. Why do they use this iconography? Well, so in the same way that everybody uses like iconography to feel like part of something, is to gain unity, to gain people's trust, to play on people's emotions, to make them feel part of something. And often when we look at things like graphic design in the far right groups, this is usually gaining traction with people. This is something that we have to look out for online, is the possible grooming of people to white power organisations and right-wing groups. Here we can see a lot of the symbols that are used. Please be aware of these. that if you ever see any of these are possibly are going to be attached to right-wing organisations. This is just to keep you keep your knowledge of these symbols up, and also to learn to recognise them. Okay, thank you. Okay, album sleeve design. What makes an album cover so iconic? Write this in the text to me. What do you think makes an album cover iconic? Okay, I'll give you 5 minutes to write that out. That's great. 5 minutes. Pause the video now. Come back in 5 minutes. Okay, thanks folks. So we look at different album covers. Fleetwood Mac Rumours. Look at the way in which the text reflects the image. For this image, I'd say that this is you've got two people here. You've got Mick Fleetwood, the character on the left hand side. You've got Stevie Nicks on the right. Mick Fleetwood's got a very domineering, very dominating stance here, which is completely contradicted by Stevie Nicks' stance. She's very floaty. This is very much part of she's very much an ethereal character, very spiritual. She's often referred to as the White Witch. If any of you've seen American Horror Story Coven, this is definitely part of her persona and image. Look at the clothing that they're wearing. Look at the way in which he's very sort of like tight in a tight suit, tightly fitting clothes, looking straight down his nose at Stevie Nicks. What feelings do you get from this album cover? I'll let you write that down to me. I think this shows personally a very unhealthy relationship between two people. It's even called rumours, so there's perhaps there's been paranoia of a betrayal in the relationship, and that's why he's looking very much as sort of like a masterful sort of stance beside a very masterful role. I get lots of emotion coming from this. This is a very unhealthy, toxic relationship with the two. But how do you think, the album cover relates to this image? What feelings does this album cover invoke, and how is this reflected in the text? For each of these album covers that I show you, I'd like you to write down the name of the band, write down the album cover name, so in this case Fleetwood Mac Rumours, and then put what feelings you get from this album cover. How is this reflected in the text? Why is this black and white? Why is he looking down his nose at her? Why is she looking away from him? All these sorts of things. This is a very, very iconic album cover. Okay, I'll let you write that down. So for each of these, write them down. Got 5 minutes for each album cover. That's absolutely fine. Just pause your video now, come back in 5 minutes. Okay, thank you. Next one, NWA, Straight Outta Compton. Personally, I find this album cover extremely intimidating, very much an intimidation picture. I think when you look at different sorts of album covers, if they want to show nowadays, if they want to show intimidation as or threat of violence or something like that, they might just show loads of guns and loads of blood and that sort of thing. But I think this is far more abstract than that. I find this cover to be more intimidating than anything that's just like guns and ammunition and that sort of thing. How is this reflected in the text? What does the text look like? What feelings do you get from this album cover? Why is there a space in the top right hand corner? Who could the character be who's looking up at all these people? What is it like? Does it look like it's I don't know, look at the scenery in the background. Does it look like this is like on a nice happy setting? Is there sort of smiles on the characters, all this sort of thing? What feelings does this album cover invoke to you? And also, how is this reflected in the text? yeah, again, for me, one of the most powerful album covers I think I've ever seen. Please, 5 minutes, come back in 5 minutes, pause this video now, that's fine, thank you very much. Okay, the next one, David Bowie, Aladdin Sane. Definitely, if you don't know much about David Bowie, very, very much worth looking into. You'll see this album cover uses something that we call negative space. Now, I've spoke to some of you about this, but not all of you. Negative space is something where you may see a lot of white space around something in the page. We don't need to have this entire background filled up. Why don't we need it? Because it's the negative space. Personally, for me, I think this album shows a lot of I think it's very insular. I think he's very sort of internalising his thoughts. This was around the same sort of time that David Bowie started a film called The Man Who Fell to Earth, and I think this shows almost like an alien creature, but not in the fact that it's sort of like it doesn't look happy. It doesn't look like he's blending in well. He looks like he's overwhelmed. He looks like he's internalising all his feelings. So maybe it's the feeling of being an alien in society, feeling almost like outcast. I think it's very, very insular. I think the white background is used specifically to make him look lonely, like he's the only person. It's very sort of it's definitely a very, very insular character. I don't know what that thing is on his collarbone, I've got to admit it, but who knows. I think that it's all about the contemplation. It's a very, very peaceful image, very lonely image. So what feelings does this album cover invoke to you, and also how is this reflected in the text? What parts of the album cover are reflected in the text, let's say. Okay, I'll give you 5 minutes for that. 5 minutes starting now, please. Thank you. Finally, God Save the Queen. God Save the Queen by the Sex Pistols. This one of the most powerful album covers of all time. This song, God Save the Queen, what was happening around the time when this was released? This is the late 70s. The Conservative government has just come in. Margaret Thatcher has just come in. There's millions of unemployed in the UK. Everything's at an all-time low. There's very much depression sweeping through the nation, especially with people who can't work, can't get jobs, who aren't being paid enough to live on. There's no housing. Housing's unaffordable. Things in shops are unaffordable. There's a great depression, and there's a real sort of a bubbling angst against the government. That things are just getting worse and worse for the lower majority of people. And then in the late 70s, also at this time when everything was just at its peak, at its worst peak. Then that we get told it's the Queen's Silver Jubilee, and what do we have to do? We have to go out into the street and we have to wave the flags for how good the Queen is, just how fantastic we think the royal family are. This then obviously people boil over, and then we get the likes of the Sex Pistols coming out with something like God Save the Queen. What feelings does this album cover invoke to you? And how is this reflected in the text? What does the text look like? Does this look like a ransom note, perhaps, or does this look like they just don't care? What do you think the reasoning will be for this? Okay, so on God Save the Queen, let's have 5 minutes. Write in, please. Thank you. Right, so from Jamie Reid, these are the messages that are conveyed by the album covers of the Sex Pistols. Please excuse the bad language. I do apologise to any of you if you're offended by this. This really shows, though, how strongly it was felt, how the anger that was felt amongst the people at the time. This was a birth of punk. This was pure rebellion going into the 1980s. I would be a lot more animated than this in the classroom if I was telling you about this. I feel very, very strongly about this. Jamie Reid covered these messages very, very well. Anarchy in the UK with the the Union flag torn to pieces, torn to shreds, and being held together by the basic means of safety pins. We could, if you think, what would the your grandparents possibly have felt like in the 70s, or maybe even your parents, how they might have thought when they saw an album cover like this appear on the shelves. I believe that it would have been, an outcry. I think there would have been condemnation of the band for releasing such crude material with these words on it. There would have also been people absolutely up in arms. There would have been complaints left, right and centre, but this would also probably have reflected the way in which if you're sort of a white middle class person, perhaps your complaints were then taken seriously over this album cover, whereas the people who were sort of the working class, who's seen by society as the lower classes, perhaps their voices weren't being heard. And this is like, so it's like you can complain about this, but then when we complain, our voices aren't listened to. And I think Jamie Reid conveys these messages very, very well. Jonathan Barnbrook, completely different. If you have a look at the line underneath, I don't know if you can see my cursor. This is one way in which we can convey text. Text doesn't have to be just like letters. We can create our own alphabet. And this is an alphabet created out of parts of the star. And this reads Bowie. Yes, believe it or not, it does. So we have a look. The character on the left hand side, the sideways triangle, looks like, if you follow my cursor, how I'm drawing like a B, then this looks like it's sat on the indent of the B. The star is the O for O, and then the two next parts probably make a W in between. The upward arrow, it would be the I, and then at the end we have an E. So this is how text can be conveyed into an ethereal way, almost like Alien. Like, this is probably David Bowie going through the same sort of things and the changes when we saw it with like the last album cover, Aladdin Sane. He's still got that sort of alien thing about him. He looks otherworldly. I think the cover on the left hand side looks like almost a bounce in space, something that's not right, something like everything's been going smoothly and then there's something that's been dented in the centre. Black Star, a fantastic album for anybody who wants to look it out. I would strongly recommend it. Jonathan Barnbrook, also an amazing graphic designer, absolutely amazing, one of my favourites. These are the sort of messages that we look like that's being conveyed by these album covers. So 45 minutes, folks. This you can probably take until just before the end of the session. That's fine if you've got here a little bit early. What I'd like you to do is pick any album cover you like. I'd like to design a new cover for the front of the album that conveys the whole feeling and atmosphere of the music on that album. Include both imagery and text, and reflect the album through both the imagery and text you use. If you finish early, try redesigning another cover in a musical style that you're unfamiliar with or would not really listen to. What I would like to see, please. I would like to see at least 2 or 3 sketches, a quick sketch to show what it is that you think, what you're thinking at the time. Then I want you to show me another sketch that's a little bit more detail, and I want you to produce a final sketch, which is your final design. I don't want you to just produce for me one final design. This is not idea development. This is not developing on concepts. You want to listen to the album, an album that you're familiar with, can even be a single, but get the atmosphere of the music, the whole feeling of that before you start working. And whilst you're listening to that music, start to think of what sort of imagery you're getting in your mind. I don't want to see, I please do not want to see just one single image that you've created, one album cover. I want to see the way in which you've got to it. I want to see your process. Your final designs are far less important than the process that it takes in order to get to them. I hope I make myself clear on this. Okay, so please do this for the rest of the session. Come back just before the end of the session. Pause your video now, and then I'll see you just before the end. Okay, please put your sketches and final design into one document called Iconic Album. this is about digitizing it. So when you've digitized your album cover, please put all your sketchy final designs one document called Iconic Album. So what have we done today? Give me two things. You send them through to me on the text, that's absolutely fine, and then you are free to go for your lunch. Please be back here for 2 p.m. and I'll speak to you shortly.